AIOps Evolution Weekly.
Welcome, everybody, to the AIOps Evolution podcast. I'm your host, Sean McDermott, and this season we are focused on technology vendors in the AIOps space. And this week we have on Digitate. So I wanted to welcome Jayanti Murty, who is the CTO of Digitate. Jayanti has been with Digitate for, I think, about 5 years, and prior to that, he was almost, I guess, like 23 years with Tata. So, Jayanti, welcome to the show. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for having me.
Great. So, I gave everyone a little bit of bio, but that's probably not doing you justice. So, why don't you give everybody an idea of what you're all about?
I spent a lot of time in the world of technology, architecture, and operations. So I've started my career inside the data center, and I've run operations, written a lot of stuff. But primarily, I would sum up my entire career around, performance engineering, high performance computing, architecture, technology, AIOps, and essentially extending all those fundamental concepts to the ever-evolving world of technology in the world of operations, application, and architecture. And I've spent a lot of time in my career working with customers, working with product organizations, vendors, partners, internal stakeholders around the world in multiple geographies, with customers in multiple industries, banking, retail, government, transport. So yeah, have a fair bit of background, well-traveled, I should say.
So to sum it all up, you've been around the block a few times.
Absolutely.
That's good. So what we want to do today is talk about two things primarily. I'd love to get obviously you've been around for a long time, been working in the space and operations, and so I'd love to get your take on AIOps and where you see what kind of got us here in the first place, and ultimately where we're going, and then we'll jump in and you can tell us all about Digitate and what you guys are doing over there. So to get started, let's talk a little bit about AIOps. I'd love to get your take on where, what got us here to AIOps, what's the history from your perspective, and what's going on in the world of AIOps today.
Interesting, and thanks for asking. I think the context and the history is very important. I believe three fundamental phenomena, has fueled all of this entire movement around AIOps. I think about 7 to 8 years ago, almost a decade ago, we started seeing a lot of complexity getting built into our enterprise landscape, which meant too many applications and a lot of additional growth in data, growth in compute, growth in business, and all the technology innovations fueling, an ever-expanding landscape of enterprise IT and a lot of interdependencies, and that led to a lot of complexity. Obviously, many enterprises experienced an era of growth on their enterprise IT landscape that is caused tremendous amount of scale, right? And the third thing is the diversity, and a lot of the legacy technologies, platforms, applications were still retained while adopting new ones, and it has created an extremely diverse landscape. Now, when you look at all of these and the traditional construct of IT operations, right, which was really a very siloed organization, you had L1, L2, L3 teams and command centers and teams that are segmented by technology towers. So it just rendered this entire construct, pretty much, I would say sluggish in the face of this extraordinary combined effect of these three phenomena. And add to that, the rate of change in the environment. It simply meant that IT operations teams in the traditional construct cannot keep up. So a lot of it was slipping through the cracks, the tremendous amount of data being generated in the environment. So it meant that we had to fundamentally reimagine the whole idea of IT operations. So I think that it was very important for machine to augment the organizations that were there. And that meant that a lot of the repeatable work, a lot of the analysis of the large volumes of data had to be done along with the human operators that are part of the IT operations teams. And that kind of created the need for having the whole construct of AIOps, which is essentially, a lot of analytics, machine learning algorithms applied to this vast amount of data to break down the complexity, break down the silos, and then use automation to essentially eliminate all of the repeatable tasks. Another key phenomena is you had few good people in your IT operations teams, and your best people in the IT operations teams were actually firefighting. And there was a lot of tacit and tribal knowledge when it meant that when people left, it created a big void for the ops teams to catch up. In many ways, digitizing a lot of this knowledge also was pretty important for the continuity and scaling up the IT operations functions itself to support not just infrastructure but applications and business problems as well. So that kind of what really fueled the rise of the technologies around AIOps and the adoption of that by large, medium, and small enterprises everywhere around the globe.
Good. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much we see the world the same way. I've been an ops guy for most of my career, and I think you accurately described what was going on, and it was just in my mind it was inevitable, right, that this machine learning technology was going to be applied to the operations environment because it is so data heavy and so time critical, right? So you don't have a lot of leeway in the amount of time it takes for you to restore service and deliver high quality service to the end users. So good. So that gets us here today, right? You guys are the new guys on the block, right? Or one of the new guys on the block. There's a number of vendors, I think, that are coming out or have come out over the past 5-7 years. So you're not legacy. Like there's a number of legacy players out there that have been bringing in machine learning into their legacy platforms. So where do you see AIOps going in, say, the next 3 years? So we fast forward to 2022 or 2024, 2025. What does the world look like from an AIOps perspective?
Obviously, the evolution of AIOps is very interesting, right? So, the abundance of algorithms and the compute infrastructure really made all of this possible in the first place. And then you had the problems to solve. And then you look at where we are today, where there is a interesting rate of adoption of the AIOps itself in large enterprises. But I think where the world is going to is to really extend this notion of AIOps beyond just IT, right? So it all started with pretty deterministic use cases around infrastructure, extending to applications. Now we'll see AIOps really extend into multiple domains, into solving cybersecurity related issues, into applications, into beyond IT and applications on the business operations side. So you will see a greater number of business stakeholders get involved in the entire AIOps journey. So definitely that is something that we see a lot. Secondly, a lot of the AIOps technology itself has to be ready to face the challenges posed by the modern hybrid multi-cloud environments that we are going to experience, right? And we are experiencing today. When you have multi-cloud, you have legacy and some on-prem applications and data centers. There is a lot of coverage out there, and many of the AIOps tools simply struggle to have the complete coverage of use cases that span across all of these. And I think we will see that become the norm, and the adoption of cloud at the rate at which expansion is taking place, it is also impacting the fundamental notion of cloud operations. So in 3 to 5 years time, I think AIOps will be dealing with a lot more use cases which are addressing a multi-cloud hybrid environment and breaking down that complexity. And that's exactly the answer to the questions that we're going to have 3 or 5 years down the line when all of these use cases really become mainstream, right? So I think that's where it is going. I would say from a use case point of view, it's greater number of domains, more cybersecurity related, more multi-cloud hybrid environments. Another interesting phenomenon that we also see is, a lot of the, I would say, architectures today are distributed in nature. Taking AIOps really to the edge, taking it to the telecom tower, taking it to a ship a cruise ship, taking it to devices, right? A lot of it is become very critical. The reliability, resiliency, and stability of those edge components. So I feel that there will be a lot of AIOps getting extended to those edge components, and there'll be a greater amount of intake of AIOps on those fronts as well. And I think these three are going to drive a lot. The other interesting phenomena that I see that might likely to happen is that 3 to 5 years of time, right? And this is really informed by the way the customers have adopted AIOps in the first place, is that the customers' ability to measure the maturity of AIOps in their enterprises will grow. So there's going to be metrics. There's going to be metrics around effectiveness. There's going to be metrics around coverage. There's going to be metrics around how useful it is to the business. So the customers or the enterprises are actually going to adopt this in a much more structured manner. The adoption of AIOps will be driven by a very fast time to value, a lot of out-of-the-box capabilities, and the adoption will be a lot more structured. It won't be experimentative. People look for the low-hanging fruit. Okay, let me automate, let me analyze and show some improvements. But now we are going to be talking about much more larger business impact, a larger transformation journey. It will be a front and center of many of the digital transformation agendas. As the front runners, the early adopters have moved on, created the way for all of the others to catch up. So you'll just see that, the thicker part of the pipe come in about 2 to 3 years' time. So it's very interesting in the manner in which customers will approach the adoption of AIOps itself and how they're going to measure the success of an AIOps journey. So, but broadly, if I have to summarize, there's the technology piece of it. There is the adoption and the expansion piece of it, and then there is the way it's going to be measured in terms of success and the impact. So a lot of these phenomena is something that we're going to see and hear a lot about in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, you bring up a really good, interesting point that I think will have to be explored at some point. You talked about cruise ships. I've actually done a fair amount of work with the Navy, and they have an interesting problem where they've got outposts and ships that have limited bandwidth, so the ability, but have very complex networks on there. So some of these ships, you got thousands of people on a ship or an aircraft carrier, and that's just the aircraft carrier, not necessarily the battle group, and they're all communicating. So very complex networks with very, very little amount of bandwidth, right? When you're sitting out in the middle of the ocean, so you're doing a lot of things over satellite. So it's these cloud AI solutions aren't really going to apply well to that environment. So distributing AI to the edge in a more how do you say it in a more independent kind of self-running aspect could be very key for a lot of industries, whether it's ship military use cases or remote facilities like oil fields and gas fields and things like that all have outside of cellular networks and are using satellite connections. So that's an interesting topic to kind of pick up later. We have a weekly show, so I'll put that on the list, and maybe we'll have you on talking about that. And the other thing I think you brought up, which I think is interesting, is the measurements and getting standardized in the measurements of AIOps and the value that it's driving. I think that's a challenge for a lot of customers right now, trying to figure out, okay, what is the value proposition of AIOps? How do we make that investment decision? How do we justify it? How do we go get funding? And then being able to actually collect the metrics and be able to justify it and prove that the thesis for all along was correct. So that's an interesting area, and I think that gets back into like you said, the whole AIOps maturity and how people are going to mature along the way. And right now we're in a place where a lot of companies are just trying to understand their maturity to implement AIOps, let alone their maturity of implementing AIOps, right? And when they start that journey. So good stuff. Excellent. So let's. You want to turn attention to Digitate and talk about that?
Absolutely.
That's why you are here, right?
That's why I'm here.
All right. So my first question to you is, your platform is called Igneo, right? So give me the origin of the word digitate and Igneo.
Yeah, digitate really means multiple things coming out of the common core. And if you look at our logo, it kind of indicates that. And Igneo, if you look at the Igneo logo, it is an ever-changing shape. So it's adapting to multiple situations, evolving conditions in the enterprise, while it's learning and getting better. So the whole idea of Igneo is to ignite innovation in an enterprise digital transformation journey. And when we created Igneo, it was conceptualized as a common platform that has the ability to reason and the ability to act in a very judicial manner. So what it meant is while the ability to reason goes from describing to diagnosing to predicting to being prescriptive, and the ability to act just goes from automating a few tasks and commands to automating dealing with situations. We wanted to have a platform that can combine both into a common core. And that's what we conceptualized. And when you look at that whole idea in the platform, that notion can be applied to multiple domains. The only thing is that every domain has its own unique nuances with respect to how we treat, analyze, and look at data and how we generate insights from it. And that's why for us, the model or the domain knowledge is very important to infuse on top of our ability to reason. And when we build our products, we build them with very specific purpose. Whether we have got a product that's dealing with data centers and infrastructure operations and application operations, or dealing with ERP operations, or dealing with batch operations on schedulers, or dealing with end user devices, right? So they all are slightly different in the way you reason about them, the way you treat the data, and the way you act on them. And when we build this platform, we actually conceptualize having the ability to reason and the ability to act in a single platform. So that's where it's kind of come out from.
Well, it sounds very futuristic. Igneo, it sounds like something from like Blade Runner or something like that. So very cool. All right. So Igneo is your core platform. And you have, from what I understand, you have a number of modules that are kind of, so you got like Igneo for AIOps and Igneo for workforce automation. So talk a little bit about the use cases of Igneo, how you're positioning it within the AIOps domain.
So we basically position Igneo AIOps as a closed loop system for autonomous enterprises. And there are two key terms that I used in that statement, closed loop and autonomous enterprises. When we say closed loop, we mean closed loop from two different connotations, right? So we have the ability not just to ingest data and generate insights, but to act on them as well, and to take the right actions at the right time. So it's intelligence and automation, intelligence feeding the automation and closing the loop. And then we have 5 core features of Igneo, which are also in a way a closed loop. So we start out by learning the context of an enterprise, and the context of an enterprise is so important, because AIOps is just not about ingesting any training data set and generating any kind of insights. It is about the context, right? And the more contextual the data ingestion is, the more impactful the insights and the actions are. So we have a context platform. We learn context of the enterprise. It is a very specialized data structure with analytics and ingestion capabilities. And then we manage alerts. We do all of the anomaly detection, the advanced anomaly detection, the prioritization, classification, prediction, and correlation and suppression of events and alerts. And we automate handling any incidents that might happen. And our incident management and incident resolution and finding the root cause analysis, we have a very unique approach to that. We combine both AI/ML and automation while doing that. And then we have the ability to take actions. When we say that we have the ability to take actions, it means that we do provide a lot of capability out of the box to take actions. And then we also accommodate all of the action taking abilities in the ecosystem. So there might be other automation scripts, other automation tools. So we are able to orchestrate across them. And finally, we also proactively, do problem management, which really means that we are looking for potential problems that are likely to happen and steps that can be taken to avoid them, reduce the number of incidents, reduce the number of alerts. So it's a complete life cycle of context to self-heal to prevent from the core features point of view as well. So from that perspective, that's why we say closed loop. When we say autonomous,
so let me, if I could interrupt for a second, because
sure.
I'm very interested in this closed loop side.
Right.
So do you guys have a lot of integrations out of the box and as well as an SDK that I could integrate? So I'm a ServiceNow customer and I want to integrate into the ServiceNow platform for ticket generation, kind of easy things like that, or into some type of server configuration management or configuration management system. Do you have all these integrations out of the box?
Absolutely. I think it's a great question, Sean. And essentially, we have three kinds of integrations that we do into the ecosystem, which comes out of the box. The first category of integrations is what we would like to call as work item integrations, because these are all the integrations that create work for Igneo, and Igneo treats them as work items. And these mean out-of-the-box integrations to ITSM systems. And, there are multiple vendors out there, ITSM vendors. And then we have a second category of integrations, which we, kind of label as data integrations. This is where we are essentially ingesting data to train our models, to generate those insights, do the situational learning. And these could be integrations to a wide variety of data sources. These are logs. These are outputs of monitoring tools. These are semi-structured information, architecture diagrams, and all of those, right? They're all data information for us. And we use them to build context, build normal characteristic behavior characterization, normal behavior models, and all of that. And the third kind of integrations is where we integrate with the systems on which we need to take action. So for example, if I want to go and make a configuration change to a database, it is not the same thing to do it on an Oracle database or a DB2 or a MongoDB. They all have different interfaces. So I need to be able to connect to each of these technologies and follow the right SOP to make those change. So the ability to integrate with these technologies and execute these SOPs are something that we provide out of the box. So we have more than
Do you provide the actual SOPs themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. We provide more than 10,000 operators out of the box.
Okay, good. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to also add that, it's not just sufficient to take actions and integrate with this ecosystem. It is also very important to traverse the fault in the right manner. So we also have fault fix models that we provide out of the box. So it informs the product the standard way to, navigate or traverse the system to identify the root cause of a fault and to basically execute the right kind of fix. So all of this is something that comes out of the box, and it is done with the intention of one, primary goal that we want to give our customers. It's a fast time to value and to build a strong upfront business case.
Gotcha. So give me, outline an example of a closed loop process, something that was one of your customers do, or one of the more common closed loop, kind of walk through what a closed loop process looks like.
Yeah. Let me kind of explain the flow itself. So when we set up deploy Igneo, right? So we install the software and we put the hooks into the data sources and we ingest the data. What we do is, let us say we are doing it for an internet banking platform, which could have n number of applications. It could have 100, 200, 300 applications. And these applications are organized by business processes, LOBs, the applications, and then each of the applications have stacks, the technology stacks, right, on which they are running. So we basically build that entire topology by ingesting this data. And then once we build this topology, we essentially superimpose this topology that we have built with dynamic data for each of these entities. So for example, a database will have its metrics that inform how a database is functioning. A VM has its own performance metrics, right? So, and each of these metrics are essentially being monitored either by the native technology itself or by a third-party tool, or you could basically query it from an interface on which it is exposed. So we basically pull in that data, which is many times time series in nature, and then we superimpose it on top of the topology. And then what we do after that is to create a normal behavior model, right? So we understand how does the system behave relative to other systems at different times under different conditions. And that is something that constantly gets updated because there is always a recency factor, right? Someone makes a big change or there's a big disruption and the behavior changes. So we keep that up to date. Now, let us say you have an application that has started throwing up a lot of alerts because of an increasing spike in either the connection pool or memory utilization or CPU utilization, or the latency from a customer experience perspective is declining. The response times are going up. So all of these alerts as consumed by Igneo, they are correlated. We use three kinds of reasoning. We use rule-based, case-based, and model-based. Igneo applies the right kind of reasoning, and then Igneo essentially performs what we call as a probable cause analysis to find out all of the anomalies in the topology for that particular fault, identify which are the anomalous factors, and then runs an algorithm to figure out which anomaly to deal first that is likely cause of this fault. Igneo then matches it up with a fix and then basically builds the fix in runtime and then executes it on the target system to fix the issue. Now, in a customer scenario, you could have a situation where there is a monitoring tool that's basically creating an alert, registering as an auto incident in something like a ServiceNow. So Igneo in that case picks up the incident, resolves it, and updates ServiceNow and closes the incident. So it completely closes the loop right from reasoning about that, finding the fix, and acting on it. And then while it is doing that, the patterns underneath are getting up to date with the newer behavior models, changes, outliers, and all of those kind of things. So a complete loop. Now, while all of this is happening, there might be certain incidents that are indicative of long-term problems, right? So let us say a bad job, which is constantly increasing its runtime over a period of time, and that might be impacting a tier 1 SLA. So Igneo detects that upfront and identifies what's causing that to deteriorate, and then you can take pretty much preventive action. In fact, I could give you an example of a financial institution where Igneo predicted more than 700 potential outages before they actually happened, and which allowed the team to take evasive action. So a lot of that kind of proactive stuff as well. So if you look at the entire loop, it's context, managing alerts, handling incidents, taking actions, and preventing incidents. And all this while looping in between the intelligence and the automation capabilities.
Have you experienced issues with customers that aren't necessarily ready to trust the total closed loop and the automated actions, and are you seeing that behavior out there from customers?
Absolutely. I think it's such a great question because, and I would like to answer this question more as a technologist rather than a software vendor, right? So. See, if you look at, you step into a customer's shoes, right? Obviously, the very notion of a software going out there and making fixes is a little unsettling for many. So what we do is, as part of the deployment of Igneo, we provide multiple controls. So we let Igneo run in a kind of an advisory mode. So Igneo does everything except for take the action, and then informs that to an operator who can then look at Igneo's recommendations and take the action. And then, the confidence is built, and then you onboard that into Igneo's cell field, right? So you start with augmenting, and then you move into more of a auto execution or auto remediation mode. So we have seen customers who have done that deliberately have had no problems in adopting. In fact, we have scenarios where Igneo is handling between 20-50% of incidents at any given time totally autonomously without any human intervention. And then a large percentage where Igneo does all the work and then ships it off to an operator for operator to take the last mile execution. So yes, there has been apprehension. And I think And I think, and this is purely my personal opinion, that based on my prediction, 3 to 5 years down the line, when you have much more complexity because of hybrid, multi-cloud, and all of that, there will be a big role to play from the augment to self-heal journey, right? So
Sure.
I think that will become pretty critical from a mindset point of view in terms of how they adopt.
Yeah, I think there's certain things that, lower level tasks that people feel comfortable automating nowadays, right? But when you start talking about, hey, we're going to automatically reload a configuration onto an edge router that, is handling a bunch of critical sessions coming in from the user base, that gets people pretty nervous right now. And I think you're right. It's just a comfort level, right? It's a matter of, seeing it work, and seeing it work a little bit, and then say, okay, let's turn it on here, let's turn it on there a little bit, and it's like anything else. Humans will eventually just get used to it, and when you see the results are coming out as you would expect, right? Then it's just a matter of momentum and comfort level. So. Yep. Great. So I know that you wanted to talk about autonomous enterprise, and I cut you off to talk about closed loop. So let's talk a little bit about, so continue on with your thoughts around autonomous enterprise.
So see, autonomous by definition is a continuously evolving approach to creating a zero intervention process, right? So whether it is in the context of business, applications, IT, the idea is to take the whole process, use intelligence, automation, collaboration together to essentially drive zero human touch. Now, but the journey to autonomous is not a switch button, right? So there are deliberate steps. So the first phase of the journey is really to build the transparency, to build that strong data foundation that is required to become autonomous, which means you need to catalog all the assets, you need to understand, profile the behavior, and start by augmenting teams with insights while you are automating, a lot of the low-hanging fruit. And eventually what happens is you use intelligence and automation together, and that's when the benefits become exponential, right? So then it's not about an autonomous enterprise, you're doing it big bang, right? You're doing the whole big waterfall kind of steps, right? You build a data platform and then you take a bunch of processes. You do it one at a time. You do it in a very agile fashion. For example, if you take provisioning, if you take patching in the IT context, if you take application health checks, and if you take, remediation from simple things like how many times have you not been able to access an application because a certificate has expired? I mean, and there are digital properties like that get impacted. So you take each and every process function in the context of, let's say, ERP or a batch or applications, and then you start applying this journey where you build the transparency, you ensure it's updated real time, you're able to profile and understand the behavior, you're able to apply automation or the entire ecosystem of automation that's available to you, and then eventually get them to solve the business problem. And that's the state of autonomous that we like to achieve, right? And what we have seen in our experience of deploying Igneo is that we have been able to achieve that pretty rapidly when you take it process by process, use case by use case. And that's why I always say that the success of AIOps depends a lot on how an enterprise responds to the organizational change that is required, right? If you have more cross-functional approach, the concept of an automation office, the roles of automation architects, people who are able to look at it from a slightly different perspective, who can prioritize use cases, high value, low volume, and high volume, low value. And then you basically organize it by business benefits and then allow that to come into the enterprise in a very standard architecture driven process, which signs off on security, which signs off on business and all of that. Then you see, the journey of autonomous enterprise really speeding up. And the idea is really to impact the business stakeholder and in a very exponential way, positively so, and that should be the eventual goal. So this whole journey of autonomous enterprise, we want to be the software and platform that actually enables it for an enterprise, and that's really our vision. And that's why we say it's closed loop system for an autonomous enterprise.
Well, I think it's a great vision. I've been talking about autonomic operations for years, and the closed loop automation is very near and dear to my heart based on some of the things in my past. And ultimately, I think enterprises, we're going to end up there, right? I mean, because we have to, because we just cannot continue to do things the same way we are today, especially as technology continues to get more and more complex and these applications become more and more complex to do it by hand. And that's kind of the basic premise of the use case of AIOps today. But it's inevitable. And I think anybody who thinks that they're not, and even AI is inevitable for everybody, right? Because at some point, AI is going to be embedded in every technology that you buy, whatever vendor. So if you're, whether they buy a specific AIOps platform from you, or they buy, or they have a legacy application, there's going to be AI introduced into, and machine learning introduced into everything. So it's going to happen. And for some organizations, they're going to, and we see, and I'm sure you see this in very large sectors of IT dependent sectors like financial services, they're going to be making probably a fair amount of investments in machine learning and AI on their own, as well as augmenting with vendors like you. And then there's another whole class of very large enterprises that aren't going to have the ability to make those investments on their own. They're going to rely on vendors like you to help them in that journey. So good stuff. So anything else you want to catch up on?
I just wanted to say one more thing to the point you said. Technology is getting complex, but managing that need not be, right? So, and that's the whole point of AIOps. But yeah, I would say I just want to add that from a customer and an enterprise point of view, I think it is very important that when they decide on embarking on their AIOps journey, it is very important for them to focus really on the time to value, focus really on the innovation and that they're going to bring in because of adopting this. And essentially, it's very important to build a very strong roadmap of how the AIOps journey is going to unfold in terms of coverage, in terms of effectiveness, in terms of business benefits. And I think it's just not about buying a cool technology and exploring it. It's more about a very structured approach, trying to solve very pertinent problems of today and tomorrow, right? And getting ready for some of the challenges that their technology landscape is going to throw at them in the next 3 to 5 years. So.
Well, you're speaking to the choir on that one, right? Because our big thing and my big thing is that AIOps is a strategy. It's not a platform, right? And it's going to be made up of a number of key technologies like yours, right? Who are going to be, but AIOps is, so companies really should be looking at the long-term vision of what they're trying to do and the long-term value proposition, and build a roadmap and adjust to the things that being able to kind of run crawl, walk, run, right? And start small, right? And find some very discrete use cases and bring in technologies that can address that use case, get their feet wet, do the analysis, get the value proposition down, start building consensus around the organization, and starting to learn how to do the closed loop, right? And getting trusting in that. And but it's going to take, it's a commitment, right? It's a long-term commitment to AIOps. So great.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry, I just also meant to say, many enterprises will find vendors out there which might not fit, the problem that they're trying to solve. Sure. And I think that's the challenge with AIOps today. It's not just about buying and applying it. So I think a very important element of AIOps is also extensibility, and that is something that we at Digitate are very sensitive about. That what we give out of the box might suffice for a large percentage of what an enterprise needs. But there's always going to be some uniqueness in every enterprise in terms of them wanting to apply it to a unique process, a unique situation. They're wanting to use unique kind of algos or unique kind of knowledge. And we built Studio, which is really we ship that with every copy of our AIOps software, and it allows enterprises to take that and extend it and to their enterprise. And I think that is also a very important element of enabling an enterprise on their AIOps journey. It's that extensibility of the platform is going to be pretty much a key ask down the road.
I totally agree. Like, one of my favorite words is context, right? And everything is implemented in context of the situation, context of the organization, context of their needs, right? And if you think about it, most IT organizations are the same, right? Most of them are the same. If you looked at where it gets different is the context, right? Are you a financial institution or are you a manufacturing? And how do you shift, the resources and that's where, customization and extensibility really comes into play. So glad you brought that up, and totally agree. Awesome. Anything else? I think I've asked you that like two times. So last chance to say anything else.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I think we've covered, everything, and I can talk a lot about competitors and our product, but I think we've
Yeah, good. So so you can find more about Digitate at very easy, www.digitate.com, right? Anything you want to plug real quick, Jayanti?
No, a lot of interesting information on the website. We've got customer testimonials. It's a well-recognized product, so I think a lot of the industry has covered it well, and you'll find a lot of interesting use cases, customers speak, and I would encourage everyone to look at all of the material on the website, and it's a great start.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I know your time is valuable, so thank you very much for coming and spending almost an hour with us today, and educating our viewers on what Digitate is all about. So again, thank you very much, and this will be the end of this episode, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Jayanti. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us in this conversation about AIOps and the future of IT operations. Interested in a deeper dive on these topics? Check out our resources available at AIOpsevolution.com. And remember to subscribe